In today's webinar, we'll be covering the basics of contract rate setup. Our discussion will include how to create a contract rate, working with parent and child rates, and how you can best anticipate managing your rates depending on how you built the contract rate. So we've got a lot of good stuff to cover today, but before we jump in, I'd like to introduce you all to today's amazing presenter, Sean Klein. Sean has over 25 years of experience in the hospitality industry. From working in food service at Disneyland to his experience in front desk, night audit, reservations, and revenue management roles, he also has corporate office experience with central systems and distribution. So basically what you should know about Sean is that there isn't much he hasn't seen in his 25 plus years of experience in the hospitality industry. So really quickly, just let me pass the presenter role to Sean. Hang tight, everyone.
Hello, everybody. Hope everyone is ready for this and has your questions ready. As Christine said, my name is Sean, and I'm going to talk you through a couple different things with contract rates, when to use them, some things to think about, and how to set them up. When I start to work with new hotels or working with hotels that are existing, I tend to look at contract rates and want to use them on a basis of things that I want to hide and control and do a couple different things. So common uses for them are going to be a negotiated rate for a company, as well as you could use it as an OTA rate and set up for OTAs, whether it be Expedia, Booking.com, any of the different things that you want to do, as well as other things like some promotional rates, where something that you've put a special a rate out there, something that you want people to ask for, something that you want to just keep a little bit hidden from a general operations. You don't want to have it do a room and rate lookup and come up with 75 different rates. You want to limit it down, and if somebody's asking for a promotional rate, let's go ahead and ask it for things to go from there. Some things that we're going to talk about as we go through to consider when we're talking about contract rates and as we set them up is that if you're connected to a CRS, to make sure and map them. I'm not going to go through the details of mapping them because they're slightly different in each of them, but talking about a couple different things to deal with them in there, as well as to remember that as you put in new rate codes, it does not pick up previously set restrictions. It's not something that we do, and I don't foresee it in the near future or even in the mid-range future. So if you've got a rate that's going out there that you put a brand new promotional rate that's there, and you've got, I happen to live in New Orleans, so I know that every year at Mardi Gras time, there's always tons of restrictions in this area of a 3-night stays or 4-night stays or different things. When you set up a new rate, it does not have those old restrictions that are out there. So you've got to always make sure that you are commenting and you're pulling in those restrictions and updating as that when we go there. So I'm going to kind of take us into the system and talk about some different things about contract rates. Anytime we're doing a contract rate, we're always going to be pulling that rate and attaching that rate to an existing rate that we have. So something that's already built, whether it be our best available rate, whether it be something else. And one of the things that I started pushing and encouraging people to do is to kind of build a contract rate base. I use it on the idea of if I'm looking at, sorry, I'm going to go to the different screen. If I'm looking at ideas that I'd rather set up a master contract rate for negotiated rates of things that I've got a master contract rate that gives all my rooms at a 129 rate, and I can attach contract 1, 2, and 3 to them as an ideal thing. And then I've got a contract rate that starts at 149, and I can put contracts 4, 5, and 6 with them. And it lets me do that and kind of control things in a much better way and how contract rates get created and what happens in the system versus doing contract rate 1 in rate setup and then attaching the contract, and contract rate 2 and doing the contract 2, and contract 3 and contract 4 and going from there. Because you just have duplicate rates, and because of the way that the system works, when you create a contract rate, it's creating a brand new rate for you to watch and manage and go from there. We've got a couple different tricks that allow you to see that it's a contract rate, but it lets you tie it back to the same rate, and it will inherit all of those same characteristics, of which can then be changed. So I hope that as you go through, you've got questions and you ask them. Please feel free to use that chat. I'm going to go in and use my example that I set up a contracted base rate in my test hotel here. This happens to be our test hotel. In my contract base rate, I've gone ahead, I've put in, as it pulls up and opens, I've put in my contract base information, I've put in my type that's corporate, I've got all my room charge, all of my basic information is here. I happen to set it up that I did all of my room types that I have in this hotel, so I've done it for all of my room types. and I happen to do this rate out through the end of the year, and I've got rates set up for all of my room types, and it was just a flat rate that I wanted to use. So I've done this, and it goes in and lets me do some things that I can now come from here, is that if I go to my revenue management on my company TA cards, I happen to already have set up one of my favorite companies to use as a reference of anyone who's ever done training sessions with me of Google, is I've already set up a company card. And contract rates are going to be set up on either a company card or a travel agent card. They work in the exact same way, but I'm going to go through, and we've got a company card. I always encourage that we have as much information filled out. It'll let you, if you're working with a CRS, generally do some matching things to bring it in and pull the data over for you. But the more information it is, it allows it for some easier matching that goes through. But to do a contract rate, we're going to go to our contracts. And if we have existing contracts, we're going to already see that information. We would see it, that we would be able to go ahead and click on our select contract if we had it in there, but we don't have any for this hotel set, so we're going to simply do a new contract. It's going to give us our opportunity to call it whatever we want to do it, and I'm just going to call this the Google contract. Apologize for my typing. Sometimes my fingers and my mouth go two different directions. And I'm going to attach it to my contract base rate. It's going to go from anywhere, but I can pull my contract base rate. And because I have that rate built out, I can say it's plus $0 or it's minus $0, but I don't have to go from there. I'm going to give a second example in another moment of where we can go. I am going to say that this contract rate is going to start from today, and I'm going to go as well. That's going to say this is going to go until, it's only going to go until the 30th because I don't want them to go through and book New Year's Eve. If I want to show this information on the guest bill, I can put that and say it from here. I will as well strongly encourage you, do not use this fixed rate. The fixed rate, if you use this and say yes, it will kind of lock this rate at one point in time. And even though it's based on a contract rate, if you make changes to that contract rate, it won't make any changes here. So I'm going to go ahead and save my contract. And when we've done this, it's gone ahead and set this up. I can put in some contracted nights if I want to and do some things that will do some tracking there. If for some reason I need to rename this contract, I could rename it. I could say that this is now Google Contract Change and allow me to save it, and it will save and update that contract. And if for some reason I needed to, I could delete the contract if I wanted to get rid of it. And these are all, that's a particularly is a permission-based item, but it does allow me to go from here. So I'm going to do one more contract rate as just a different example of two different things, and then I'm going to go back into our rates section to talk about some items that hit within there and things to think about. So if I go backwards, I'm going to do a contract for Expedia that we happen to have set up, and I'm going to do it in a similar manner, and something that I tend to do is that I'm going to make a new contract for them in the same manner that's going to be my Expedia package. And I'm going to tie this off of my bar rate. And this is going to be, because my particular hotel, I have a 20%, I'm going to say that's my package, and it's a 23% margin that I'm going to do. So it's going to go and base my rate off of best available rate, and it's going to be 23% less from it. And again, I'm just going to take this out till December of this year. And because it's Expedia, I don't want to go in and do any there, and I'm not going to go into billing when we go from there. But this has created our contract rates. And if we go back into our settings and go into our rates section, we'll start to see those there. So if I go to my rates, so if I go in and I use my contract base rate, if I search off of that using my search field on the right, I can say, here is my original contract base rate. I now see my Google contract change because that's what we changed the contract to. So it creates a rate code in our, what we called the contract, and it's still tied and shows that it's based on our contract base rate. Just kind of using the reference point so that we remember it, looking at our original rate setup, we see that it's $219, $179, $199, and we see those rates there. If I search for my Google rate, it's going to do and pull in my show the same rates. So if I pull it in, it's pulled all of my same rates. They're slightly grayed out because it is a child rate. We can't make a change to it. It's going from there. And as I mentioned, it has pulled in all of the same the base details that we pulled from our contract base rate. So this is where we want to make our changes. And I can now come in here and say that this is special rates for Google employees or whatever else we want to do, and all of that information that we want to show on our reservation and rate screen. As well, this is my opportunity in the space that I want to put my rate code that I'm going to use to communicate with my central reservation system. So I'm going to say that's GOGL just to communicate with that. And I could make other changes. If I needed to go in to set up a market code, it pulled in my main market code that was there, but maybe I need to change it for some reason. And I'll do that in actually the other one. And I can also say that, this rate is a special rate and I don't want to make it commissionable. So it's all of those fun things that we can update from there. And we've saved that, so I can make all of those changes. And now I'm going to use my reference of what I had just done for Expedia as a secondary item. So when I set up my Expedia package rate that we just did, here's this new Expedia package one that we did that's tied to our bar. I can do a couple different things because I want to make sure that I don't have it as part of my rate types of discounts and going from those things. So I'm going to change it from my type that I want it to put into my OTA because I want to use that for a couple different things. I want to make sure that it's not coming up in my regular search, as well as I want to use that for my yielding functionality. And I also want to come into my additional details because it pulled in my market, but I actually want to change that and put it to my non-opaque market that I want to do because I want to do it. And the bar rate in this hotel happened to be set up as call-in. I want to actually make it and change it that I don't have one here. I'm just going to say that it came as an online booking. And because it's an Expedia and it's a standard, we know that it's absolutely not commissionable, so we don't want to do those because it pulled in all of those same things from our original rate. So we've done those. It's still got all of our rates. If I looked at, we've got the date ranges that we did because we've pulled in different ranges from bar rate. So it pulled all of those types of things in there. The other thing that I did not do is I did not change my package, my rate code, because I want to make sure it's communicating to my central reservation system and it's my Expedia package rate. So I've saved that and it's going to let me map that and go from there. This way, I've done this and I've got that, and I now have that rate code that is being pulled in. So when my CRS, whatever one it is going through, sends over the rate plan EXPP, it's going to match up to this rate code. Kind of going back to the slide, that's why the advantage is using it that way, is that we can set up these items when we have it, is that we've got one master rate contract that can have a rate code in it, and then we can have 3 different contracts or however many contracts that are attached to that main master contract rate, and they can all have a different rate code so that as they come in, they get booked to there versus having to go through and say, I've built Expedia rate, and I've got Expedia package, and then I do a Expedia contract package, and I've got Expedia, something else, and I've got all of these different things that it can do it. I can instead tie it together and go from here. I'm not trying to come up with a million different rate codes that are matching and doing some different things that way. So I hope that's making sense to everybody and going from there. I haven't seen any questions pop up yet to the link of it, so I'm hoping you kind of come in with some things that way. Now, as I mentioned, part of what I push and encourage is that when you're using the rate manager, and why you want to use those rate types, is that beyond just showing the distribution information as well, it's going to show us information for our rate types. So if I'm using my select rate change, I can say I only want to work with my OTAs, or I want to work with my corporate rates, or I want to work with anything that way. I'm actually just going to pull in a couple different things that I want to use because it'll go that way. And so when you are in Rate Manager, things to think about and know from there is that it will show us a couple different things sometimes it's hard when I have my screen at a normal size. It will show us that we've got a contract rate. So it does show that we're contracting. It does show that we've got those information. And if we switch to the contract details, it will show us who it's attached to. So you actually do see the information about what client and what travel agency and or company card that these are attached to. And it goes from there. Same thing happens if we actually go into the details of it. We'll see our rate information on here, but anytime we try to change something, it's not going to let us adjust this because it is a child rate. It will let us put any restrictions we want to, but it won't let us change the pricing because it's set as a child rate. It's going from there and doing those. And the same thing then, the same idea happens though instead with bar. We can do that and we can make our changes and it then impacts those items. The other thing that I was kind of talking about in the rate is that if I'm not looking at specific rates, things of why I encourage using rate types is that I can come in here and I can use it and say, show me all of my discount rates. And it lets me come through and I can see all of my discount. Unfortunately, in this hotel, bar is set up as discount, which I might not have done that. It does let me make changes that I can do changes across the board to all of my things that are in there. So I can say, yes, I'm closing all of these rates on this particular date and make a change to all of my contracted rates. If I go back and change and look at all of my rates, I'm going to see that I've now changed it. I've only updated the things that were in there. So it allows you to do some quick things and making some changes there. So those are some places to look at and go from there. I do encourage you if you're in Rate Manager and you're trying to understand something to use the contract deals and let that details and let that move out so that you can actually see the information there and go that way. It will show it at the top for you and go that way. It does show us all of that fun information of who it's attached to. So it does keep kind of changing that information for us. So please do use that as you go through there. And from that, those are kind of the quick things I wanted to talk through and give an overall sight. And from that, I'm going to, since I haven't seen anything come through as a text question coming through, I am going to open up and unmute everybody. And if you don't all talk at once, give you some opportunities to ask some questions. So I've opened it up. Fun questions from anybody since I covered a bunch of things fairly quickly.
I have a question. I have set up contract rates for my discounted rate codes for one of the properties in order to hide them from the general search screen, but they are still showing. Is it true that they need to be a certain rate code or market code in order for them to be hidden with contract rates?
It's going to, actually that's really going to tie back into, let me shrink this up a little bit. It's going to tie into your rate types that they're done with. So if I look at settings and we talk about rate types really briefly, and we talk about different things that go from there. This is where it's going to tie into is that if we have rate types are going to drive different things that way. So anything that is if it is set up as a rate type, whenever we add a new rate type that we create in a test one, it ties into our rate classifications of public, corporate, or group. A group classification is always going to only attach to groups from there. Public corporate ones are going to be hidden by nature. So if you then have those discount rates attached to a rate type that is tied to corporate, they won't show unless you go from there. If they're attached to a rate type that is public, they will still show. So if you have them, if as an example, if I go and look at a rate that's already set up here, like this AAA rate is set as discount. If I had done it instead as a contract, if I came in here and changed this from discount in my rate type and made it into corporate, just as the example, it would no longer show in the general availability. It would only show when you put it into put the company card or travel agent card in to pull it up.
Sean, I have a question. You mentioned earlier that when you create a new rate code, it won't apply restrictions that were previously set. But if restrictions are set at the property level, will that carry across?
So within Rover, we don't have restrictions that are really set at a property level. If I'm in the rate manager and I'm in here and I did something that says for this time, if I look at a date range and I've done a date range to say yes, and I've said show me all rates, if I come in here and say I want to close all of this, doing this, we're actually setting this restriction on each room and rate combination. It's not on a property level. So there's not the Rover doesn't really do a property level restriction. You can do it at one fell swoop for all, but it's not a property level restriction.
Do you know if there was a fix to the description box? Because previously, if I created a child rate and I placed a description that was different in that description box, for example, you picked up that best available for the Expedia package and then overwrote the information to reflect your information for Expedia package specifically, that at one point for me was reverting.
Let's see, because we changed it and did that. So I know that we just did, because remember, here's one and it's still here. I know that there was a change and there was some work that specifically was dealing with the charge codes. So I want to double check on that one, but I think that the description is updated and that's going to stay and not reverting back there. I would want to double check on our charge codes because I know that was a secondary tied with issue. Well then, other than that, I don't have anything for you lovely folks today. I want to thank you for the time. We are recording this, and we will be putting this up in the knowledge base as well as sending it out. So if you had any issues with sound, we will have it there for your reference. But I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your attention today. We refer back to knowledge base. There's a lot of good information there, and we keep adding to it. But thank you all.